let's talk about authority. Romans 13, all authority comes from God, correct? I guess the question is, in the context of scripture, it's something about setting up kings and authorities and things like that. And I think we talked about that last week. I think divinely, it's under God's divine order of things. People that are elected, I think God places and raises leaders of our time for different reasons, different purposes. I'm not talking about the elected officials at the moment. The authorities of our nation are in place, and we're to respect that according to scripture, correct? You agree with that? My next question is, where does the Constitution, in my opinion, all laws, rules of governance like the Constitution that are derived from the authorities raised up by God also have that same authority for us as people of faith to obey. We need to obey the laws of the land and the constitutional principles of our country. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. I would say yes, unless when they ask me to do something God forbids.
Okay. Now, also, every elected official that takes an office, I've taken it, Mike, you've been military. I don't know, Dave, if you were in the military or not. You took the oath that you swore allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. I will defend, all that. That oath of office is taken by every elected official. And you all are man of God, you know what scripture says about oaths. Do not take them lightly and take them with all sincerity under God. I'm trying to understand from your all's point of view, how you view the authority of the Constitution as vital and as important to our country and ordained by God, correct?
Is the Constitution ordained by God?
Well, indirectly, because it's derived from people who, if we believe God has set up to govern our country, and it's been derived over centuries.
Well, I guess it's a human attempt. The Constitution is not inspired like Scripture.
Yeah, right. I guess that's my point.
Okay, I agree.
It's not. Although people would say there are elements of Scripture, its wisdom and its understanding of human beings embedded in the Constitution and stand behind it and underlie it in the way that it's intended to function. Okay, it assumes a populace of people who have been formed in ways that are not 100% focused on themselves and whatever they want and whatever they want to do. Okay, then essentially the Constitution is rendered null and void because it can't function in a populace that is totally self-centered. And then I still believe, and I'll go back to Genesis 1, 2, and 3 and look through history. I mean, this is the battle that we see that transcends political partisanship, but is at work in it. The problem is not with the Constitution, just like the problem is not with the Bible, it's with the people and how it's utilized or not, or how it's falsely utilized for self-serving purposes or highly selectively used. When it says what I want to hear, but on the other hand, when it doesn't, then I don't bring it into play. And that's what we're living with right now. It's not limited to Donald Trump and his administration, that's for sure. That's why we have a judicial branch that's supposed to be able to render clear interpretation to help us navigate these kind of impasses and these kind of conflicts. But if the judiciary then becomes a very activist judiciary that wants to go beyond interpretation and wants to move towards implementation and get its hand in politics, then that's compromised as well. Just like a congressional branch that doesn't want to do anything.
Do you believe the judiciary is at that place as well?
Oh, I think we see evidence of that now, and it's not new. It's existed in the past, but I think right now there's some pretty clear cases where judges are allowing their partisan political views, and they are activist judges. Their histories, their backgrounds, their previous rulings demonstrate that clearly is what they're doing. And they somehow have taken it upon themselves that this is what they must do, right, in opposition to the current administration. I'm not taking sides for or against Donald Trump in this. That's not my point. Right. My point is the judiciary that operates in overreach as a reaction to what they see as presidential overreach. And one overreach, and you see overreach doesn't cancel out the previous one. It only continues the cycle, and it only exacerbates it and the downward spiral of American decline and American decadence. And so you hit me, and then I slug you back. Okay. Well, then it goes on and on and on and on and on. That's where I feel that we are living in on the ground day to day, caught in the middle of this.
There's this whole thing now going on, broad statement that we mistake accountability for revenge, and we use revenge in the name of accountability. I'm just throwing that out there.
That's good. That's good.
There's a situation where I can't remember the situation. It was on the news. It was basically, well, you just said, Mike, is he using it for political revenge, something for political revenge? And then the other person was saying, no, he's just following the law and holding people accountable, but that is seen as getting revenge. And it's so blurred maybe now that you can be swayed either way without looking clearly at what the issue really is. It's a lot of that out there now.
Jerry, what often drives much of this, and it's in the rhetoric, is that it's about justice. I mean, that needs to be brought into the conversation, because justice is used to justify ways of thinking and acting, and often without any definition. So the best Christian definition we have in Christian history is by Augustine, 5th century bishop in Northern Africa, who wrote The City of God. And towards the end of The City of God, he says that the only true community that exists is one that is just, and justice always begins with the worship of God, because justice, classically defined, is to render the other what is due to them. We begin with rendering to God first what is due to him, which then shapes us and forms us to render to others what is due to them. Well, God does not exercise his justice in vindictive, hateful, condemning, nasty, mean-spirited ways. That is not social justice by Old Testament and New Testament standards. It is simply not. And justice is predicated, for Christians, is predicated on the very character of God revealed in Jesus Christ, where his justice is shown fully and completely on the cross, where he forgives his enemies and those who killed him. So justice always leads to mercy. And yet justice is being used to justify this vindictiveness that only then throws more gas on the fire and exacerbates the hateful, spiteful spirit that's in the air, that people just kind of absorb and respond to things, just off the cuff without thinking. And they're angry. They're always angry, about every little thing. And justice becomes the handy tool that you can use. And I just think it's terrible. I mean, I really do. It's just terrible.
I think we're beyond that point. I agree with you, Mike. But what is the vehicle? Okay, we've got that Christian perspective of justice, and we can assume our founding fathers had the basis of that understanding, and they formulated a secular government for a people that could govern basically on, I think, Christian principles, but for a nation that wasn't totally Christian. I mean, they certainly recognize the fact that we would not be a nation full of Christians, and we're not. We talked about the percentages earlier. So what is the vehicle for justice now? I understand as a Christian what our understanding of justice is, but there's a secular definition for justice. It's called rule of law. That's in my words, the spiritual interpretation in a secular way to a secular nation. We've got the rule of law as a means to serve justice in our country. So we as Christians who know both dimensions, spiritual justice from the eyes of God, the biblical view, and secular justice as seen through the Constitution, through our authorities, when we see the violation of that, of the rule of law, or the lack of the rule of law, when people are arrested without any charge of criminality, and without any due process of law, there's something wrong in our country. Would you agree or not?
Yeah, and I would say on the other hand, we see the same thing when violent criminals are arrested and they're let out on the street, and in the same day they commit another violent act. And that's done in the name of justice because presumably our legal system is incredibly and hopelessly biased and irredeemably lost. So it works both ways. And see, this is what I think you're getting at, Jerry, which I appreciate so much. It's God gave us a mind to use in this. And it requires that we think clearly and we say, like we have been saying to each other, on the one hand, but on the other hand, as opposed to a kind of right or wrong, absolute way of thinking that that's simply wrong. That's simply wrong. In all cases, all places and times, that's simply wrong. And then they have to do this always, always, always. We're talking to each other and we're recognizing that our system is as good as it is. We Americans think it's the best that's ever been designed. It's still imperfect and it serves imperfect people who then use it in imperfect ways. And as Christians, we should have enough detachment from it. As Dave said, we belong to the true King of the universe to be able to look at it honestly and see and acknowledge what we like and what we don't like, and to be able to acknowledge what we don't want to hear as opposed to simply what we only want to hear. You're right about, okay, let's just say illegal arrests. But then that's also the concern of, completely ignoring the law, which only contributes to more crime. And people who study these things can point on the ground to cities all over this country where there's evidence of it. And the people who are supposed to be served are actually being hurt the most. So justice needs to be looked at not just as an ideal, but what are the on the ground consequences of it? But that requires a kind of practical wisdom that the founders assumed. It's called prudence. It's a classic virtue. We don't cultivate prudence today. I mean, everything we do goes against that. Just to slow down, think our way through it clearly and recognize, there are things I want to hear, yeah, and there are things I don't want to hear, but are also true.
Scripture is clear how the people of God respond according to their elected officials, whether they're being under persecution or whether they're under a righteous king. And Proverbs is clear: when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rules, the people groan. What I'm not saying is that's what we're seeing today, but I'm saying what we see being manifested in our country is a deep dissatisfaction, a deep unsettledness, because we're not a nation of Christians. We're not a nation that have that perspective that you and Dave and I have. So we have to measure our response, we measure our perception of the government with a grace of people who don't quite see things the way we are. And we have to have the standards of the due process of law, have the standards of the Constitution, because that's the secular rule that people understand. And I understand you're saying, well, it's been violated before, it's a part of our tradition. I get it. But my
No,
point
it's not
is,
part of our tradition.
well, part of our experience.
It's part of our history. Yeah, I'm saying
Part of our
that would
Thank you,
be
Dave.
justifying
That's
it.
good. Good point.
But
Yeah,
my
justifying.
point is, how do we as a people, and I believe people of God, start to communicate together to try to bring down the temperature? That's the same thing I was saying last time and what I continue to say.